How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Prozzy here, and I am incredibly excited today because I'm going somewhere that I've always really wanted to go. I want to tell you a little story about my early days back in China and figuring out Chinese culture and also figuring out Taiwan, because although they are different countries, they do share similar cultures. And I used to work with this girl who became my close friend, and we used to debate constantly about Chinese culture, which isn't something you should do, but we were good friends, so it was okay. And I was determined to figure out China because, of course, I lived there, but I was really struggling, which happens to a lot of foreigners. I couldn't quite figure out why people behaved certain ways. Why do they treat each other in that way? What made their behaviors the way that they were? I was determined to figure it out, and I would debate and argue with my co-teacher constantly. Until one day, she bought me a book. She just slapped it onto the table. She just said, read it. And I took the book, and I'm not much of a reader, really, to be honest, but I was like, fine, I'll read your stupid book. And after the first page, it blew my mind. Every chapter I turned, it would answer every question I had about China, about the culture. It was written with like a touch of humor. It was written in a way that's easy to understand in English, and it just blew my mind, and I quickly fell in love with this book, and I believe to this day, it should be your Bible. If you're gonna move to Taiwan, if you're gonna move to China. Anyways, I started to really research the author and figure out who this guy was. And I really fell in love with his work. He's a really incredible person. And the reason I'm so excited is that today I get to go to his friggin' house. I get to go to his house, which is great. The guy's name is LinYuTang, which you can see here. And he was born in 1895 back in China, and he moved to Taiwan. He ended up living here at this house for a long time. I've never been here before. I'm super excited to check it out with you guys. I know maybe it's not that interesting to everyone else, but I cannot wait to see where he lived and explore all of the different things. That I don't know what's inside yet, but what I'm hoping to find is there's already the garden, which I can't wait to explore. I'll tell you about the garden later, but I'm hoping to see the Ming Kuai, which is like a Chinese typewriter, which is amazing, and if I see it, I'll explain that later. But anyways, let's head inside. So the reason he's so exciting for me is that he's such a advocate for Chinese culture, and he's also a major contributor to the bridge that gaps Chinese culture and the West, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I just feel like his book really helped me in a major way, and in fact, I don't think I'd still be living in Asia if I didn't read his book. But anyways, check this out. So this is his house. And he built this house, he designed this house himself with a hell of a view, I must say. And for me, it's kind of cool when you admire someone historical, you know, whether it be a celebrity or someone famous for whatever reason, you get to see like where they live. It's really interesting. So I'm gonna nerd out a little bit here, I apologize. It's really cool about that his house is that it's kind of got this Western style study. The table's obviously Chinese. But his study is super cool. This is where I guess he would read and spend a ton of his time. And they have all his old books. This is the English side. And then we have the Chinese side, which is really cool. But his favorite place, and the place that I'm most excited to check out, was his garden, which is kind of outside here. And before we get to the garden, check this out. Chinese houses have these sort of like courtyard areas that you come to first. So this is really traditional. Chinese houses, of course, don't really have this anymore because most people live in apartments. But it's a place with no roof, no ceiling, and it's just kind of like an open courtyard. And then you'd have different rooms surrounding the courtyard, which is so different from today. So it's kind of cool that he designed that house in that traditional way. But his most favorite place is the garden. And he talks about in his book the difference between a Western garden and a Chinese garden, which is like something you'd never think about. But a Western garden is very trimmed and looking nice and fine, and everything is defined and everything is cut perfectly. But Chinese garden is really different. A Chinese garden is supposed to kind of represent nature in a natural way. So it's like nature in your home. This was like his favorite place to come and relax and think. Which I think is amazing, and there's some really, really huge trees and cool things like that. And I'm kind of nerding out. Like, I can't believe I get to like be in the place that he was. I'm actually not sure I'm allowed to be in his garden, but I'm gonna go anyway because I really want to be in LinYuTang's garden. You know, he wrote about in his book his worry for China because, you know, Chinese gardens were suddenly becoming rare. Nobody really had them anymore. Because, you know, China kind of went through a rather rough period, and he was saying the only true Chinese garden in Shanghai was owned by a Jew. Well, it wasn't even a Chinese guy owned it. And this is the really amazing thing about LinYuTang, the author. He was really concerned about the future of his country and the future of what China might look like. And so a lot of his ideas were focused on the past, which is a really radical thing to do back then, because when he wrote My Country and My People in 1935, China was going through kind of a rough phase, we'll say that. And a lot of people at the time were kind of thinking of in this new way of getting rid of old Chinese traditions, old Chinese culture, that kind of thing, bringing in the new. He kind of didn't really listen to any of that and went his own way and focused more on Chinese traditions, more on Chinese culture. And for the time, and even now, that was really something. I feel super lucky I get to see this. I wish I could take my Chinese friend, who still lives back in China. We still keep in touch. I wish I could take her here and show her his house. I think she'd be blown away. Because again, like, we would just debate every day about Chinese culture, and his book just brought it all together for me. And I don't know how disrespectful this is, but I'm gonna try to do it in the best way. But he was, he's buried here, and I don't know if that's gonna be in the shot or not, but there's a cup of coffee they set out for him every day because he loved to smoke from his pipe and drink coffee, which I think is super cool. And he had to be buried here in Taiwan. He wanted to be buried here in Taiwan, but the reason he moved here, because he was born in Fujian province back in 1895. He had to leave China, obviously, for the political reasons and the things that were going on in the country, and he was buried here. And I wonder if he would like to have been buried back in his hometown, because one thing that you'll often hear from Chinese people, this is one thing I also learned from him, is the affinity they have for their hometowns. And it's one of the heartbreaking things about Taiwanese people, especially for the older generation anyway, is that, they were born in China, then there was a civil war, they had to come and retreat back down to Taiwan, and they were never able to go back to their hometowns. And it's one of the saddest stories you'll hear if you come to Taiwan, especially from older people. Another really cool fact about LinYuTang is he was an inventor. He liked to invent things. And one of the things he invented was the Ming Kuai. Ming Kuai literally translates to clear, as in understandably clear and fast. And it was a Chinese typewriter, which for the time is amazing, but how the hell do you do that with Chinese, which is character-based, right? There's tens of thousands of characters, and you can't have a keyboard that big. It'd be the size of your wall. I'm just wandering around his house, kind of my mind getting blown. This was his bedroom. Friggin' slept here. Which is crazy. And one thing that a lot of Chinese people noted about him, as you can see in some of these pictures, is that he was very Western in the way that he dealt with his wife, gave her lots of hugs and kisses and things, which is not typical of a Chinese couple, especially in public. Everything in his house has like a do not touch sign on it, and all I want to do is touch everything that he touched. I don't know why. I'm sure this isn't like unbelievably interesting to everybody, but I just have so much respect for LinYuTang and what he did. And he's done so much. I mean, he's invented the Chinese typewriter. He invented a toothbrush that automatically puts toothpaste on it. He invented the Chinese word for humor because he felt that Chinese people lacked humor, because again, like I said, he spent a lot of time in the States, and one of the most charismatic things you can do is be funny, utilize humor, and he thought the Chinese people sort of lacked that. And you'll see that if you go to China as well. They still kind of do, but he created the word for humor in Chinese. Like, I wanted to share his story. I wanted to share this house and his book with you, and I've recommended his book before on my channel. Oh my god, I just walked into one of his trees. I've recommended his books and before on my channel, but honestly, it's a Bible for any foreigner thinking of coming, and it's a great way for Taiwanese people to explore their own culture in a way that's understandable and clear. And I would recommend, if you're Taiwanese, get the Chinese book, because the English one is a little bit difficult. It's a perfect summary of Chinese culture, which is an impossible task, and he did it because it's so complex and it's so deep and it's rich with lore and all kinds of stuff, and it's amazing that he was able to fit everything into a book. I think it's so cool that he lived here, and it's amazing that the Taipei government keeps it as a museum. A lot of the people here keep telling me how surprised they are that I'm such a big fan of LinYuTang. This is kind of weird. But I think it's amazing. He really, honestly, if he helped me in such a huge way, I really think that, you know, for a lot of foreigners, he'd do the same. So I would hugely recommend picking up his book, My Country and My People. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know this video is more for me than I think it is for you. I'm just nerding out over this guy, but I just wanted to share with you the reason I stayed in China for so long, the reason I continue to stay in Taiwan and Asia. It's him, it's his work, and so I just feel super cool that I get to come to his house and check it out, and you can too. It's up here in the, what is this mountain called? Yangmingshan Mountain, and it's super cool, it's super cheap to get in, and if you're interested in Chinese history, if you're interested in Chinese culture, the differences between the East and the West, I'd recommend just coming for a little visit and reading the books. Honestly, really amazing. Anyways, I'm gonna continue nerding out around the house, but that's where I'm gonna leave you guys. Stay positive, keep your stick on the ice, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.